Okay, so we can call this meeting to order and we need a roll call vote, I assume. So, Mark,
Here.
Lee,
You said Lee here.
and Elizabeth is here. Great. Should we first, let's see, you can approve the minutes, I guess. If that makes sense. Everyone good with that?
Sure. I think we're doing the
Yeah, what date are we doing, Shannon?
yeah, that's a good question.
October 30th.
Okay, October 30th.
Yeah, they're October 30th.
Okay. Move we approve the October 30th minutes as distributed.
Give Lee a second.
Find them. Or
I'm gonna pull them up because it's been a little bit since I see.
Shannon, what day did those get sent out?
They were on the calendar invite.
Okay, got it.
November 8th.
Got it. Okay. I'm good with them.
All right, so that's a second.
I second.
Great, all in favor. Mark,
Aye.
Lee,
Aye.
and Elizabeth says aye, so that's all set. Chris, you want to go ahead with your update? If there is anything.
Have no updates from the state legislature. They are they adjourned July 31st or June 30th and have been working on different legislation. So this has been a really unprecedented amount of activity during an informal session. Now they're expected to meet informal session soon to review their economic development bill. But in terms of any recent legislation impacting Concord, there's no updates to report today.
Okay,
Question.
yes.
Do you have any sense, Chris, of whether the delays on the legislature's side weigh in favor of allowing more time under whatever auspices they decide for us to spend the money? I mean, it's the clock is ticking, and we're gearing up to issue an RFP, and can't really award a contract without the money. And
Right.
Yeah, so I think that there was 4 different areas for updates for government affairs. I can skip right down to the bottom, the Office of Economic Development. Lee, if you want to talk about that now.
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
I liaise with my colleague in the Office of Economic Development, the Director of Contracts, and he said that they are planning on sending out contracts November 18th, likely to the town manager. He didn't want to tell me what the amount was, if they're going to do 2 separate contracts or one, but he is getting more guidance on that. We expect to see that, any any week. And he, for the first time, acknowledged that there's real concerns about spending this money in a shortened fiscal year. So they have heard our concerns about that, and they are working on drafting or developing a contract that would allow some sort of ease or accommodation to spend over fiscal years. So they have heard that message. They're working on issuing or releasing a draft contract that reflects those concerns. And we just haven't seen it, but we are kind of reassured that they've finally settled on a date. And we're hoping to see something in writing next week, but yeah.
That's good news.
Yeah.
So is that something they can just do on their own? They have to go back to anyone to allow for that spending over different fiscal years?
Yeah, I think we'll have to see that when it comes out. We had in the past talked about, legislative treatment to state funds or PAC, previously appropriated
Yep.
consolidations. It sounds like there may be another mechanism in place that kind of does a similar thing without requiring legislative approval.
Great. Okay, well, that's really good news in all things considered.
So I suggested this a few meetings ago, but if obviously the more flexibility and broad whatever comes out of their office is, the better. But if they do have to keep it somewhat narrow, my prior suggestion was say, hey, if we can get our consultant under contract, certainly this fiscal year, probably late winter, and we can show them that contract and demonstrate that it's just by definition going to take, let's just call it a year and a half to complete the scope of work, that perhaps that contract in itself would be reasonable to allow to go past June 30th.
Yeah.
In addition to whatever other mechanisms may be available, but
Right. I'm sure there'll be some word like committed or something, funds.
right. So if it's under contract, it's committed, but
Committed,
it's
right.
not spent under, within by June 30th.
But it's great news that they're cognizant of it.
Yeah.
So.
I'm sure we're not alone.
It's all right. Nothing's gonna change over the next few months. It'll be fine. We'll see if we have any of this money, but anything else from DCAM or DOT?
No other updates. I think Megan's been providing updates on DCAM at the general MCI advisory board meetings, and no updates from Alan on interactions with Department of Transportation.
Yeah, I was traveling last week, so I didn't attend the meeting on Friday, so I'm not sure what happened in there. Haven't had a chance to catch up with it. Chris, were either you or Shannon there? Okay. I'm not even 100% sure that it happened because I'm not sure that Paul was back either. So that's good. Probably the only other thing that I might fit in under this sort of general update was shortly after the meeting last week, the public engagement group came up with the idea of trying to create some sort of virtual tour of the property that might be, might be published as part of the materials that we have, as our ongoing citizen outreach. And so I wrote to Jeff Quick to just get some contacts, and he was really quite accommodating and gave us a list of several people to be in touch with about, including the Scott Cotreau, the Department of Corrections Acting Director for Media Relations, and a couple of other people who might help that group get engaged. And I think they were gonna work with Donna McIntosh and the MMN group, to try and decide exactly what what they are looking for, whether it's like surface access and a drone flyover or something like that that might be produced in there. So really, this is all by way of saying that I reached out to the Department of Correction to try and find out who we could work with, and I think we could just, sort of file that in terms of the contacts that we've reached out and made.
Okay, so this was something I was gonna mention, because I wasn't there, but I listened to the video or watched the video of the last meeting, and
Yeah.
that seemed to be one of our action items, that's what you're addressing, Mark, was that this subcommittee was supposed to figure out coordinating tours with DOC.
Yeah, I think we figure out how we might be able to get access, and my expectation is that this production of whatever it is something that might eventually go up on the MCI Concord website, but we may also want to, there's at least two other cases that are likely to be used. One is direct access for whoever's responding to this RFP when it gets developed is probably going to need to be arranged as some kind of on the ground tour. And then whether or not we later or at any point decide that we want to try and get the public or citizens or whoever else in, we ought to try and figure that out, so it's kind of routine and we know whether it's going to be on a scheduled basis, if it has to be by appointment, and those kinds of things. Just trying to understand who can help us.
Yeah, because my guess is the virtual tour is not going to satisfy everyone, but it is a good idea.
Yeah,
Maybe there's like open house days where they can bring certain, where they just do tour after tour for certain groups.
right.
Thing. Okay, so Jeff Quick, I'm sorry, give me the name of the person Jeff Quick told you to contact.
Okay, so there were several people. So in his first response, he copied Simone Thomas, Dean Gray, and Paul Lillehagen, of course, as the people. But then they went back and talked about it some more and thought that we should probably be working, specifically for the other one, Scott Croteau, Croteau.
That's for the virtual.
Yeah, he's the acting director of media relations for the Department of Correction.
Okay.
And so what I suggested that we do is, and we would do is, I gave that information to Donna McIntosh, and I think that John Boynton and that team should get together what their specific ask is, and then go back and we'll set up a meeting. So just kind of making that contact. And Jeff has been serving on the Warner's Pond Advisory Board, Warner's Pond Task Force, as the DOC rep, because I forget what his title actually is, but he's sort of do one of you guys know? And I think he's one of the managers or directors that runs the Northeast Correctional Facility now.
Hey, Mark,
Wow.
Yeah.
could you explain to me kind of what is the connection between the Warner's Pond folks and the prison site?
Yeah, I mean, in short, when they were working on the dredging proposal for Warner's Pond, they had reached out to MCI and said, is there any place on your property that we might be able to deposit what we dredge out of the pond? And they had come up with a process where they could do that. Now, one of the things that happened was when they let that RFP out, it came back really expensive. And part of the reason was because the area they identified was within the secure area of the MCI property itself. So the process of getting trucks in there to do any kind of dumping was, very protracted, with restrictions on how many trucks and what you had to do to get in there and so forth. And that really drove, among other things, really drove up the cost of that bid, which is how we ended up with the Warner's Pond Task Force, because they had about $3 million to do that. And this ended up coming, I think the one response we got was more like 9 because of all of this. So when the NRC put together the Warner's Pond Task Force, one of the things they asked for was, and Jeff was involved in negotiating that, was a DOC representative. And since then, they've identified some space basically on the field that is between the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail and Route 2 on the south side of Route 2. So really almost adjacent to the pond, where if they scrape up the topsoil, they could lay down some of the material that they get out of a dredge project and then put the topsoil back. And that turned out to be a much more advantageous place, because essentially they could just pump it out of the pond right over there, dewater it, and come back. So it's looking much more promising. But Jeff's been involved as an ex officio member of the Warner's Pond Task Force as they've, sort of been exploring this particular option.
So other than just this dredging spoils location, is there any other real connection between prison?
Just the proximity, and the Warner's Pond Task Force was sort of constructed to make sure that it had, anybody that was sort of abutting in the vicinity has representation. So that's why the scouts are involved, and basically anybody that exists in there. And we recognize that the corrections, the Department of Corrections was there, and of course they had this concern about whether there might be a better place. And just to finish that story, since then we've actually been able to figure out that we might be able to move material over to 2229 Main Street, because they're going to have a need for some fill too. And being able, and they have the EPA actually has to buy that. So
Okay. Well, I don't have authority to offer it, but if none of those options work, the CHDC's Junction Village parcel could be a possibility, and I think you could access that outside the law.
Okay, that's a good thing to keep in mind as well.
Okay.
There's going to be just, if you haven't had enough meetings tonight at 6 o'clock at Kai's Road, there's going to be a Warner's Pond Task Force meeting, and I think one of the main topics on that is going to be another look at the dredging proposal. Oh,
I don't have authority to offer that at the moment.
Sorry about that. It's going to be the dam removal group is going to be presenting. So if you're interested in that, but
Has that decision been made to remove the dam?
No.
Okay.
What's going on in the Warner's Pond Task Force is that there's 3 subgroups, kind of like we have 3 subgroups, and each one is working on a particular option. And the task force is going to come back together and evaluate those options against the criteria that we already decided to try and figure out which one is best. And the options are remove the dam, dredge the pond, or do some kind of, light touch, no action, try and maintain things as they are approach. And probably the most recent information on the maintaining things as they are is we've discovered that the control structures on the dam are insufficient to really draw down the pond in any useful way. If you opened them up completely, in the wintertime, you could expect the pond to fall 6 inches, which isn't enough to get rid of the invasive weeds. So that was one of the things we were kind of hoping we might be able to control the weeds by doing that, but it looks like engineering wise, unless you added some kind of pumping, which would make the cost go up a lot, you can't do it.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Probably more than you wanted to know, but it is kind of
No,
related.
I'll use it as a segue, since you said they have 3 task force and we have 3 task force, to talk about us. Because it looks like basically from the meeting the full advisory committee meeting, it was the tours and then following up with specific stakeholders after that initial public outreach subcommittee letter went out. So I guess the question is, should we talk about doing that now? And then other than that, it seems like we've kind of been put on hold, which I don't really mind. My main thing was making sure we got control of the RFP, which we did, right, as a committee. So it doesn't bug me that we don't have a lot to do right now, but tell me.
I'm not sure that's accurate.
You don't have control of the RFP. Okay.
It sounded to me, and I haven't seen it, or if someone sent it to me, I haven't read it, but it sounded to me like it was mostly done by, I don't know if it's land use or who, but certainly not us, and it was.
Oh,
being-
land use, you mean by the advisory committee or land use like Elizabeth?
Land use
used?
subcommittee, that's.
Yeah.
And
Sorry.
they were prepared to start, if they haven't already, send it to town staff, give them a. and once
Correct.
over.
When I said us, I meant the full advisory.
board,
committee.
okay. Sorry.
Yeah, and so the land use subcommittee met yesterday and they did, they worked on it a couple weeks ago. It went to town staff last week. They reviewed town staff's comments. It's going back to the advisory board for Monday. And then I think with hopes that after Monday, it's just gonna be finishing touches, and you know, making sure it has the appropriate RFP language that needs to be in there.
Good.
Right, so yeah, no, Lee, you're right. We totally didn't get control of it as a subgroup, but it doesn't, I mean, so fine, in my opinion, as long as the whole committee is looking at
I
it.
just misunderstood what he said.
Yeah, no, you're right. And then, which then says that our charter should just go back to our original kind of wishy-washy charter because we're not really doing anything
So-
right now.
Someone, I don't remember who said it, but someone in the last full board meeting said basically, you know, we anticipate that the role of this subcommittee won't really kick in until quite a further way
And zoning and
road, like in the context
Yeah.
of zoning and other stuff
Yeah.
like that. which-
Yeah.
that being said, I do think it's important that I mean, I think Alan, fair enough to leave Alan alone while he's dealing with MassDOT right now, but I think that's gonna be an important conversation that we'll be part of
Yeah.
when he's
And
ready to
listening-
get into it.
Listening to what Alan had to say, though, I got the distinct impression that that was Alan speak for, I could use your help bringing them to the table. So I think we should be
Interesting, okay.
leaning on Alan, on MassDOT to say, look, you know, we really want to know what you're doing and we want to get you off the dime and, you know, because making it onto, I forget what TIP stands for, Transportation Improvement Plan or something like that. So getting a project from, we're studying it, to we've got a proposal, to it's actually somewhere on the state's radar to eventually be funded is a pretty big lift. You know, it's a classic. Nobody I've talked to who's been living in Concord for any length of time has ever said anything to me other than, you know, I'll believe it when I see it when we talk about changing the rotary,
Right,
you know, and
although,
we still have that challenge.
right, although, okay, so interesting, maybe I should reach out to Alan, because my sense was that he was like, yes, I want help, but not quite yet, because we're
Yeah.
just viewing everything, and so wouldn't wanna, so Chris, I know we've talked a million times about you reaching out to MassDOT, and I assume you put that on hold, given that Alan has kind of been delving into this stuff before we do that, or?
Yeah,
Alan?
I mean, based on my conversations with Alan, my sense is similar to what Mark is saying, is that Alan's kind of recommending a dual approach where,
Okay,
you know, the subcommittee issue correspondence to help push along the state politically, and that there's also a kind of an operational conversation between Alan and his colleagues at the state level to help push things along.
What do you think, Chris, about a communication, presumably a letter from anyone from, you know, Simon and Barrett to Kerry or whoever kind of our biggest hitters are, to literally the commissioner of DOT saying, this is what's happening, we need your attention promptly, get on it.
I think that's a great idea. You know, with these sorts of requests in the past, I guess I'd recommend to you guys that you come up with a list of like 3 or 4 things you would like to see in the letter, and I can draft something and send it to Simon's office, and then he would, you know, revise it and send it over to DOT.
why don't we do both things, though? It sounds like a letter from us. And also ask it, I mean, Simon obviously has been totally in touch with them this whole time, because I know that he's working the whole corridor, but I agree, so I
Right.
don't know whether that's us giving you some point, I mean, what I would say is let's give some points. You draft a letter, Chris, and we send it out from us first. CC Simon on it.
Yeah,
Does that make sense, Lee? I mean, I agree that we need the political heavy hitters. I just think we do it in addition to us.
I think a letter from us is gonna get tossed in a file, never to be seen again, but if it comes,
Maybe,
you know,
but
from like, it could be like one letter from our delegation, same letter, 3 signatures or whatever, and another letter that's very similar from the town manager. or
right. Yeah, I think
Select board.
there's sort of a, you know, we've got these 10 groups or whatever they are in the contact list that we're supposed to reach out to. I think they can get that, the DOT can get that letter from us to say, hey, we're here. This is how you make contact. If there's anything that you're working on that's related to this project, please let us know and expect to hear from us. And then at the same time, we're also drafting a specific letter that says, hey, Department of Transportation, we know you're working on something that we want to talk to you about. And, you know, we've got these concerns about local circulation. We've got concerns about the timing and the design for the Route 2 rotary and whatever else we might concern about, maybe the status of their facilities on, I'm not sure what the other points are, but
How do we incorporate traffic flow into the new development area?
yeah.
can I step back and say, can we go back to our original plan, which is try to get a representative from DOT to meet with us?
Well, this is my point. Like, you know, like Adam Backey, who's the commissioner of DCAM, we have
Yeah.
his full attention. He's shown up
Right.
at multiple meetings of our,
Okay,
et cetera. So if we could try to do something equivalent at the his Mass DOT counterpart.
I
Yeah.
see. So really what we're doing, I would argue, just instead of sending a letter being like, hey, Simon, can we try to arrange a meeting with our subcommittee and Simon or someone from his office and at least have a first sit down?
Yeah.
That's what I would argue, as opposed to just sending a letter, which Chris, do you have a contact over there? Or, I mean, Simon would be able to get us probably a meeting, I would think.
Mhm.
But does that make sense, Lee? Then we're face to face as opposed to just sending something out and hoping we hear back.
Yeah.
I think
And then we can start, like, we can have an initial conversation with them and kind of drill down on more, as opposed to, oh, we hear you're working on something. We can actually respond to some of the
Right.
things we hear. That would be what I would want to try to do first. Mark, I don't know. Lee doesn't seem sold.
my opinion today is that it's addressed to the commissioner. It says, you know, as you know, the prison closed. We're sure you're working on the rotary. We've got this board and subcommittee. We'd love to have a meeting with appropriate representatives from MassDOT, and we'd welcome your participation. Short and sweet, you know.
I don't disagree. I
incorporates-
just
What?
think maybe go to Simon and say, hey, Simon, we want to get this meeting. What's the best way to set this meeting up? But if he says, send them a letter and this is who you should send it to, then great. And if he's like, let me work on it, and we probably want Simon at that meeting as well, or we want Kyle or someone at that meeting as well.
Let's ask Simon's opinion while we work up a draft for the letter to the Department of Transportation Commissioner and then finalize it once we've got his opinion.
Okay.
Right.
I think one of our
Mark,
primary,
I'm happy to reach out to Kyle and Simon.
yeah,
If Chris, you want to draft something for us to look at?
Sure.
Okay, good. Then we've accomplished something. Does
yeah,
that
I
make-
think the primary ask there is really, you know, who's in charge of the Route 2, you know, redesign project, and can they familiarize us with what their timeline is? And
Just on that point, I'd be really surprised if whatever rotary redesign and construction even begins before the prison property is ready to begin redevelopment. So to me, that suggests some kind of interim traffic flow pattern that maybe would integrate well into the design of the new rotary, but doesn't have to wait for the new rotary to be finished.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I mean, I think the key thing is that if we can get settled on what the design is going to look like when it's eventually constructed, then we can reserve the right pieces of property and, you know, the space. Maybe there's even some space that needs to be reserved for the construction process or temporary routing itself, and then doesn't become available until later. So DCAM has that, you know, it's basically about trying to figure out where's the project going to happen and what's the end state going to be like. Once we've got that mapped out, then it's possible to figure out what to do with the rest of the property.
Okay. All right, so Chris is gonna write the draft. I'll talk to Simon and Kyle, and then we'll figure that out. And then, like you said, I think it was Dan at the meeting who said he thought we would really kick into gear with zoning and things like that, right?
Yeah,
So,
I think that sounds right.
yeah,
I
so,
think,
go ahead.
yeah, on that point, it feels to me like when we reach that, we've already done some scenarios, we've already got public input on what the preferences are. I could see the subcommittees sort of rebalancing in terms of how many people and stuff like that, because some of the heavy hitters on land use and zoning are probably on the land use committee anyway. So, I mean, I know I heard Dan saying that, but I also thought maybe not the sweet spot of my skill set, but okay.
Yeah, no, you're right. Maybe some of the public outreach stuff kind of winds down, some of those people
Yeah.
come on. All right, great. But in terms of our current, what we need to do, I think just go back to our original charter. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I
If
think we
that's- I mean,
could,
I don't really care about the charter, but sure. And then, this DOT stuff. And other than that, is there anything else we really need to be working on at this point? My sense is no, except for the, reviewing the RFP when it gets sent out for Monday, just as part of the general.
yeah, I think it makes sense for us to get an actual hard list together of what agencies are we supposed to be talking about. In the back of my mind, I keep on thinking that, Mass Historical and like the historic preservation kind of domain is something that would make sense to spin up to. It's not as critical as transportation, obviously, but it's one of those things where, let's say they don't move as fast as other things and can really throw some unexpected obstacles and opportunities into a project. So it'd be nice to make sure that that's moving along so it doesn't provide us with any surprises later.
So, yeah,
I think of all the moving pieces, Mass Historic is probably likely to engage and give us their requirements or suggestions faster than any of the other ones.
Oh,
And
good.
other than the big building that I don't remember the name, but right in front of
the
the
Warden's
wall,
building.
like I would like them to, maybe engage on that structure and maybe at the same time identify any other structures that they might want to specifically retain for historic purposes. I don't know of any, but
Yeah.
And I don't know what authority they have to just reach in and take stuff, but I think it's a good point. So then I guess what I'll say is we have that initial list from the public outreach committee, right? That kind of marked which ones they thought we should reach out to. Why don't we all submit, if we have revisions to that, to Shannon? And then Shannon, you want to come up with like a master list of who we all agree with? And then also to that point, I would say, Chris, we had a general letter. We were gonna do the general letter that was just basically their letter, but revised. So should we just also have Chris do a general letter that says this is who we are and you're gonna hear from us?
our subcommittee or the whole?
Yeah, our subcommittee. So like a follow-up to the outreach committee's letter. That was my understanding, is that we were supposed to follow up after the fact to our specific stakeholders or whatever.
Yeah, so I guess we probably need to talk about the content of that letter, but I think that it's some kind of contact point, something that basically says if your agency is doing anything or has any plans or constraints on the existing MCI property, we'd like to know about that and have a contact who can come in and tell us about that. And we'll be in touch with you when we need information about your plans relating to the site. Those are the points that come to mind for me. What do you guys think?
I think that's right. And then I think we're gonna identify people that, I mean, I don't mind also reaching out to Mass Historic separately or reaching out to saying to Simon, this is another group we want to reach out to. But yes, I think we should get a blanket letter, just like what you said. Ready, prepare our list of people that we think we should send it to, which is starting with that spreadsheet, right, Shannon? That was from the public outreach. And then we can get going on that. So
Yeah, and I think the main ask on the letter is a primary point of contact in case we need to bring your agency into some of the planning or whatever, so that we know who specifically they're working with, you know, or they think has this, so that we can get to them faster when we need to, just like we did with the Department of Correction.
And conversely, I'd like to ask that we be invited to relevant
Yeah,
meetings.
sure.
and we're asking that of outreach, the subcommittee, you think? Is that reaching out to John?
No,
I think it's us.
yeah, so I forget who's on that list, but let's say the state police decides they're gonna, you know, they need to do some kind of construction project on their barrack, you know, their station or whatever. We'd like to be invited to the planning process that suggests what they're doing on that, because it's,
Yeah. Okay, yeah, no, I get that. I guess the other question that I'm bringing up is, are the public outreach, are they gonna be having meetings that they should let us know about also? Because they reached out to everyone. So if they're being informed of things, they should, John
Yeah.
should make sure.
Oh,
it's so both things, I guess.
yeah, and I think that we had some discussion, Shannon, you can remind me what it was, but that we would try to keep some kind of consolidated correspondence, you know, contact file kind of thing, so that anybody on the advisory board can look up and see, hey, Legal and Government Affairs sent this letter to that agency, and Public Outreach sent some other letter, and we received this response. And so ideally, we're sharing information across the subgroups so that we always look like we're, you know, in sync with each other.
Yeah, we are tracking correspondence sent. The amount being received right now is still very light. But you know, that is subject to change pretty much at any time.
Yeah.
What I can say about the community outreach subcommittee is that John has actually sort of made the executive decision that they're meeting once a month now, because he doesn't feel like they have enough action to take at this time. I think John is working with me and Donna pretty directly about if he wants to see something different on the website. And I think that's, you know, sort of the focus of their work right now.
I'm okay with that.
we
Sorry,
haven't-
go ahead, Shannon.
It's okay. I was just saying, I don't know if they're really having meetings that like with stakeholders that I
Yeah, I
think
see.
at this time.
I see what you're saying. Yeah, okay, and he'll let us all know at the main meetings. In terms of meeting schedule, because you brought it up, I'm not opposed, but I think at this point we should meet in a couple weeks just to get this letter done and get this out and sent. Does
Yeah.
that make sense to everyone?
Yes.
Okay, and then after that, I mean, that'll be Thanksgiving. I don't even, let's
Yeah.
see. What
We
are
can
the,
get some sort of meeting with DOT set up in the month of December. That'd be a real win.
yep, okay. Great, Chris, and maybe, yeah, Chris, I'll probably CC you on that Simon stuff so you can see what's going on and forward it to Mark, whatever you want to do. Okay, great. So I think those are some good action items. Anything else? Yeah.
So thought this for a while, but I think one of the elephants in the room is potential municipal use of portions of the site. When I say municipal, by the town. So number one is obviously the wastewater treatment plant. You know, I hear numbers thrown around like 25 million, blah, blah, blah. Like I don't hear any updates from Megan or anyone else, unless I missed something, about what either the town manager's office or the select board are thinking about acquiring the wastewater treatment plant, improving it, replacing it, anything like that. And then I think the other thing that, if it's not on the table already, I think it should be, is a potential relocation of like the DPW facility onto a portion of that site.
Yeah.
I think the location's really good, and I think it's probably the cheapest land you're going to be able to acquire for that purpose. And there's obviously a lot of space. So my point is, I'd really like, I mean, if there's just no focus on either of those things at all, I think it's time to start looking at it. And if there is, I'd like to be kept better informed about what the administration is thinking.
Okay, so I can sort of update that. So if you watch the select board, you might have heard us talking about this land use matrix idea.
Okay.
Which is trying to programmatically understand all of the town's municipal facilities and really prioritizing the public safety and public works needs again, and looking at that against the opportunities for the Peabody School, the 2229 Main Street property, and the MCI property, and what, if any, kind of consolidation or moving around, or which pieces could handle which things. We're looking at you know, working with the town manager and the facilities department. They've got some relatively recent, like 2018, 2017 kind of work on what the sort of square foot space deficiencies for different program areas were, and what they're looking at, and trying to understand, because we do have all these pieces of property coming online. And so there's a discussion about starting a group that's focused on trying to solve that. We've already received some correspondence from the public about the idea of, you know, we should spin up a specific group just to decide what to do with Peabody School. Well, okay, but, you know, it's kind of a piece of a bigger picture. So
Housing, problem solved. Like, what else is going to go there?
What'd you say? What?
Housing. It's a residential neighborhood. It's on the outskirts of town. It's not, you know, for anyway. Sorry.
I mean, the other question that's come up, you know, before you get to the answer of housing, is what are the chances that, you know, the housing that's already in the pipeline, combined with whatever comes from MCI, puts us in a position where we need another elementary school?
No, I've thought about that. I asked someone, I think I was talking to John Boynton at the end of the last meeting, and I suggested that we engage with the superintendent or someone to ask specifically, you know, what is the breaking point of school population before there needs to be either an expansion or a new school or something.
Yeah.
I was thinking it specifically from MCI, but you raise a good point about Peabody as well, or really any area in town.
Yeah. So we've actually asked the school committee to participate in that land use matrix so that we can understand that. Because I mean, if you go far enough down this road, you can even say, and what about Ripley, right? Because that's a last 60-year-old, you know, maybe probably almost 80 years old now, you know, school structure, and does it make sense? So we have an opportunity to really have a lot of potential options, and we need to pick that off, because I think you're raising the exact right point. At some point, we need the municipality to be in line along with everybody else who's saying, build more commercial, build more housing, build more whatever, and recreation. Where's the town saying, yeah, but we also need a public safety building or administration building or something like that. And so certainly from the select board side and with the conversations that we're having with the town manager, we're really saying, you know, we expect you to be right there with your ask as best you can.
The town manager.
I think it is up to us as this subgroup of the MCI advisory board to keep pushing that, because I don't see anybody else saying, you know, as a potential user of this property, we need to be there. And I think it relates directly to the wastewater treatment facility, because you could frame the question of how much land does the wastewater treatment facility come with?
Yeah, and you know, I'd just like to see kind of a decision, you know, realistically, probably within a year, but just like a go or no go for municipal uses on that site.
Yeah.
Other than wastewater treatment plant.
Right.
So if it's ruled out, then we'll just cross it off the list. If they really want to pursue it, then we need to add it to the list of things that we're working on.
How is this addressed? And I still have to review it. The RFP. I mean, because assumingly our consultant should be taking a hard look at this too, municipal uses.
There is a statement in the RFP that the consultant will work with town staff to understand municipal building needs. And you know, to perhaps consider that in the scenario development, but in no way does it require that being one of the scenarios, but it's just set to consult staff and consider.
It definitely should be part of the master planning exercise.
Right.
And just keep in
We're
mind,
getting a draft of the RFP, and that's a good note we could put in there, right? And
Yes.
we call out these specific properties,
Right.
you know, look at the P
Well,
2229 Main and.
yeah, I think what we need to do, at least when I think about it, I think we need to push the town itself, meaning the town manager, to really say what their prioritized needs are, so that those needs are really in the mix with whatever else anybody else comes up with that says they want. If the Recreation Commission says they want fields and you know, and somebody, the Economic Vitality says they want more business. That's where, you know, and that's separate from the consultant is supposed to help, you know, sort of wrangle all of that into some solutions, but they can't also be the advocate for one particular
Oh, no, not at all.
set of needs. And I think the advantage, of course, is that when the town says, we'd like to move DPW there, that automatically says, well, okay, now Kai's Road is potentially free for something else. And that could be, you know, it could be an advantage or an advantageous result of that, because then we could maybe do some housing in Concord Center that we couldn't do before because there's Public Works is there. And
exactly. And between that site and the police and fire building up
right.
the street, that's two sections of the most valuable real estate in town.
Yeah.
So that's, you know, cost offsetting. I don't know if it's been done anytime recently, but
Yeah.
I would suggest commissioning an appraisal of each of those sites. Just
Yeah.
so you got it, you know, you'd have to update it in the future, but at least you got a ballpark.
The select board's already asked for an evaluation to be done of the Peabody property.
Great, but
So it sounds like, Mark, like, I mean, to put a positive spin on it, the select board is kind of trying to get their hands around it through this matrix.
Yeah, we're pushing it to say there's this global thing about what all the opportunities around town is going on that needs to feed into this planning process.
Because there's a limited amount of money, obviously.
Yeah.
And that whatever we can do, I mean, however we can help, as you're saying, push the town manager, we could, I mean, tell us how we can help with that.
Right. I think that if we look at the, you know, we can, as this group, make sure that we're focused on what the progress of that is and try and reconcile the timelines of it to what this project is going to need in order to feed into the scenarios that are developed around the town, around the MCI.
So would that be just at some point getting Carrie to come talk to us? I mean, I'm just trying to.
Well,
practically-
I'm hoping that she's gonna really, my understanding is Megan's supposed to be on point on this, and I think that that also is. Rufus, is that the facilities manager's name? I'm sorry,
Russ,
Russ. Sorry.
His nickname is Rufus. Yes.
Okay, it was an RU. I got fairly far into it before I screwed up. Anyway,
Well, you know, if, I'll keep an eye on the select board agendas. If you, I mean, I may choose to attend and speak on my own behalf, not
yeah,
any part of this committee, but alternatively, if you'd prefer to kind of run with some of these ideas as a select board member, I'm totally fine with that too. But if you think it would be more impactful if a resident stood up and said something, I'm happy to do that.
well, like I said, that's good.
Or both.
Or,
Yeah.
or if it's impactful for this subcommittee, I mean, I don't know,
Yeah.
to try to insert itself in some way.
Right, and I just wanted to say that we've got some elements in place, but for whatever reason, I'm also uncomfortable as you are that we may be getting behind on identifying what the specific municipal uses are that would be most advantageous to town operations. And so I've been pushing on that for a long time. And I do think that if we don't start to see some forward progress in there, then your offer to raise the volume on that is a good one.
All right, we can do it. I will not speak on behalf of this subcommittee or the board
Yeah,
without
all right.
authority in the future.
Yeah, but I think that that's kind of like the DOT thing. It's one of
Yeah.
those things that we should be doing in the meantime to try and make sure that it's in place at the right time for whatever, land use is doing, because they're going to be all involved in trying to pick their vendor and all that kind of stuff. And we need to think about what's got to be there for that vendor to be successful. And this is one of those things.
Yeah, in all honesty, the town should be pushing on our committee and saying, these
Right.
are the things we need there. The fact that we're having to kind of drag it out of them is not fantastic,
Well,
but it is what it is, I guess.
yeah, it's when you're playing soccer and they tell you to pick your head up and look down the field,
Mhm.
we're the look down the field group.
Well, we'll do whatever we can, it sounds like, in any capacity. We even offer to go to select board meetings. Look at that, Lee.
Yeah,
Follow
Well,
through on that.
I'm not patting myself on the back, but that's at
No,
least
it's good.
partially
No,
how
I was
this
patting you.
board came to fruition.
yeah, it
Yeah.
is.
I
Okay.
showed up at every single meeting until they did something.
Awesome. All right, great. Okay, anything else? I think we have public comment. We need to ask Linda if she wants to say anything. Linda, you want to say anything?
Not right now. I appreciate all you're doing. I'm listening with great interest.
Thanks for being here, Linda.
Thanks, Linda.
Okay, so maybe we'll just recirculate that, check that list so we can mark who we think should be included if there aren't already included and who we're going to correspond with. I'll reach out to Simon. Chris is going to draft those letters and we will meet back here. Okay, let's see when we meet back here.
And Shannon, after the town folks are done with their comments on the RFP, will that be distributed to the full board?
Yeah,
Great, thank you.
good.
I mean, my goal is to just, it's not gonna matter, I guess, whether we send it out before or after Thanksgiving, no one's gonna pay attention to it anyway. So, before or after, I mean, they're not gonna pay attention until after, hopefully they'll pay great attention after. So what does everyone think? My schedule is pretty open, because this is our busiest time of year, so I'm stuck here.
For our next meeting?
Yeah, for our next meeting.
Probably not the 27th because that's the day
Yeah,
before.
we could either try the beginning of that week or the week after.
How about, what about, do we like Wednesdays? Did we decide that?
Wednesday, fine.
December 4.
Why don't we, I would suggest December 4, and if something more pressing comes up, we can Move it sooner.
Sounds good.
Okay,
I mean, I guess we can circulate that stuff without having a meeting too, right? So. Okay, so the 4th, do you want to say noon again?
sure.
Yeah.
Here, I'll send a calendar invite out.
That's great. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
And good luck with pushing everyone forward on all the fronts that you and Mark and Lee are gonna be working on.
Great. I hope your recovery's going well.
Ugh, it's so annoying. I'm still not weight bearing, so it's like, boy, crutches are more exhausting than I thought they'd be. Let's just put it that way. Yeah.
Just think of all that arm and shoulder strength you're developing.
That's, you know, as I'm going, ow, ow, I'm like, yes, that'll be one payoff. And I won't have any muscle in my leg, but that's fine. Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone. And
Okay.
talk to
Want
you
to
later.
vote, just vote to adjourn.
Sure. Aye.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. Second.
Aye.
Aye.